I don't normally drop two videos this close together in one day, but I was going through an article from over at Fake Fox News, trying to parse through all of the psychological operations for our next installment over at Patreon. And a thought occurred to me, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I just could not wait until tomorrow to ask my audience a question. There's been this big push to get everyone in electric vehicles. This, of course, is an electric semi-trailer made by Tesla. They only have a range of about 500 miles now, but allegedly in some utopian future, this is supposed to be how we move things around. But they're not thinking about something clearly that I haven't heard anyone talk about. And it's real simple. When you look at this truck and you look at this truck, what do they have in common? A great many things. This one, of course, is driven by a diesel engine. But they both have something in common that will never change. It's called asphalt. And asphalt is a petroleum product. You will never get away from this. Not anytime soon is there any way the entire interstate system of the United States, which is the lifeblood of our economy, the interstate system, could ever possibly be replaced by anything other than petroleum-based asphalt. There are a lot of other questions, too, about braking and the batteries. One specific one about the batteries is this. See, you can build a brand new truck like this, and you can fire it up and get the seals all warmed up, maybe go put, 500 or 1,000 miles on it just to get everything broken in, and then you can go park it. And as long as you go out and you do regular maintenance, fire it up, make sure the seals don't rot, this vehicle will last decades and decades and decades. If you don't use it, if it's just sitting on a lot, and all you do is go out and run it around the block and get it warmed up every now and then, it should last forever. These things get 500,000 miles on them and last for decades when they're pulling loads. Well, guess what happens with Tesla batteries? Once they're created, they're on a time clock. Meaning, here's the article I'm talking about. Trucking jobs evaporate as shortage worsens. Well, let's say we make this huge fleet of battery-operated trucks, and then all of a sudden there's not a demand for them. Sorry about that. And there's not a demand for them. And then they have to set and go unused for a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. Those batteries are going bad, just sitting there, just like the ones you have in your drawer for your flashlight or anything else. There is a time limit regardless of use. You create one of these battery-operated trucks. In 10 years, 15 years, I don't care if you put 1 mile on it or you put 100,000 miles on it, the batteries are going to go bad. The batteries are going to go bad. And we're even having this problem here in Florida after the hurricane. These things catch fire when they go bad and they get contaminated with water. What's the environmental impact of EV battery manufacturing and recycling? Even a little tiny Tesla car, the battery is 900 pounds. Now, the batteries needed to move trucks, and this is an aerial view of a truck stop in Iowa, are orders of magnitude larger, and they need to be charged right now every 500 miles. A lot of these trucks put in thousands and thousands of miles. You know, they're running literally, the cross-country ones, 60, 70 miles an hour, almost round the clock. So it's not hard for them to roll up 20, 30, 40, 50,000 miles just like that. I mean, that would represent, what, 100 charges? 100 500-mile charges? Can you imagine the amount of charging power you would need just for this one truck stop in Iowa? If all of these trucks pulled in at night and plugged into the charger, do you know how, you would need your own power plant just to charge these few trucks. And once again, you're never going to get away from asphalt paving. I've never heard one single environmentalist ever even put forth an idea about how you could strip up all of the roads or cover over, even leave the asphalt down, I guess, if they didn't want to get it out of the environment. What could you put over top of the asphalt so that you wouldn't ever need to dig up more petroleum to replace it again? You couldn't, because the rubber tires are designed to run on asphalt. These tires, all of these, they're specifically designed to grip and run and be efficient on asphalt. So you would also have to replace the tires. So you're talking about a wholesale change. Even this thing has rubber tires, the same tires as a regular semi. This idea of getting away from petroleum products is just ridiculous. It hasn't been thought through. And once again, like I said, just the idea of the batteries going bad in 10 years, whether the truck is used or not, and the idea of trucking jobs evaporating and more demand for. I mean, they give you the numbers here, and it doesn't look like it's some huge number, but the point is, at some point, trucks are going to be parked. Diesel trucks will be fine. They'll be just like you left them. Now, you can't leave them set for 2 years in, like, say, freezing cold Chicago and not go out and start them, because all of the seals will rot and all of the fluids will drain out. And you have to go out and start them and maintain them. But you're not going to be taking any real usable life off of them by doing that. They'll literally last feasibly forever based on maintenance. I mean, they'll last for decades and decades and decades and decades if treated properly and maintained properly. But not Teslas. Once the batteries go, they're done. And that's it. And I don't know if anybody's even considered, what it would take to pull the batteries out of a big truck like this and then strip off all of the poisonous, horrible chemicals that are way worse for the environment. I mean, it's a nightmare waiting to happen. It could be an environmental catastrophe. This idea of trying to protect the environment with electric vehicles. It could be way worse. Because the stuff that's in this, the manganese and the cobalt and the lithium and all of the other rare earths, not good. They don't go away. And it's incredibly energy intensive. And even at that, this vehicle is going to have some kind of grease, some kind of lubricant somewhere. The bearings in those wheels. I have another question too, and trucker guys, help me out here. I used to have a Class A CDL years ago and drove. And I don't know how, because my understanding of these new electric semis might be limited. How are you going to go down hill through the mountains with no gears? Because if I'm understanding how electric motors work, there's no gears. It's just a straight line on the torque curve. That there's no, it's just like the Teslas that go out and run 4.9 in the quarter mile. They don't have to shift. If my understanding of this vehicle is the same thing, if it's the same technology, where it's just a crap ton of torque all generated straight through one power band, right up to the speed that you need, how in the world would you adjust for weight going up and down hills if it's only generating X amount of torque? You see, that's the advantage of gears and diesel engines, is that you can adjust RPM and gear. That's why some of these are 16 speed, 24 speed. And you can go up and down and through the mountains. Plus, there's the issue with the braking as well. Are you really going to tell me that you're going to trust an electric air pump? An electric air pump to pull the brakes? To release the brakes on these? I mean, I'm assuming this is the case. Those of you that aren't aware of how big trucks work, in your car, the brakes are by default off until you press the brake pedal, and that activates a huge cylinder that pushes a bunch of fluid into little lines that then are attached to basically grippy little shoes that grab the discs attached to your wheels. Well, in a big truck like this, it's reversed. When the truck is setting off, the brakes are spring-loaded on, and you need to crank up the engine to, in a classic semi, you crank up an engine, and attached to the engine there's an air pump, and that air pump fills tanks. And when a certain amount of pressure is achieved in those tanks, that air pressure is then released, and it pulls the springs off of the wheels. So there's no way to drive, there's no way for the vehicle to move with there's no engine power. A lot of people don't realize this. In a semi, there's no way to move the vehicle. There's no rolling in neutral, so to speak. There is, of course, neutral in the transmission, but if you don't have engine power, the brakes come on because you need the engine, that air pump, to keep the brakes off. Every time a trucker presses his brake pedal, what he's doing is he's bleeding air out of the system and allowing those brakes to come back on a little bit to slow the vehicle down. That and the gears are what slow the vehicle down, primarily the gears. How does this work in an icy, snowy, cold, freezing environment up in the Rockies or in a super, super hot environment down south? I mean, how does this work in an electric vehicle like this with all of that weight behind it? I mean, if it's an electric air pump, there better be 2 of them, maybe 3 for backups. Because if you lose voltage for any reason, and I mean, this just sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen. It really does, when you really think about it. Driving your little electric car around, not that big of a deal. But one of these monsters, if a Tesla battery just for a little tiny car is 900 pounds, how much do you think this battery weighs? And it goes rolling out of control with all that poison on board? Slams into something, explodes all those chemicals and catches fire? And that's not make-believe, that's already happening. That's already happening just from having too much salt water in them from a flood. Ironically here, those trying to save the environment might be doing something that could be way, way, way worse for it than what they're trying to fix. And still there's no argument for the asphalt, which is really the true 800-pound gorilla. The asphalt and the tires alone, regardless of what's driving the vehicle. So these are the questions I don't hear anybody asking. So I will leave it there. Hopefully we'll see you guys over at Patreon a little later on. God bless. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.